get the most
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I don't know, because there are some things that I already talked about, but they asked me. And I'm Evan Brown.
And together we founded Rosemont Horticultural, a vertical hydroponics farm. I first became interested in vertical farming when I was teaching in Southwest DC. One of my students asked why we couldn't have the outdoor garden program year-round. I found vertical farming to not only be a solution to my seasonally limited lesson plans, but also a solution to a larger, more global problem. Traditional agriculture has destroyed 50 to 70% of our planet's soil carbon content, which is vital for growing food and preventing climate change. It has caused 400 dead zones globally, and that's caused from the 153,000 metric tons of fertilizer runoff. And it contributes between 15 to 50% of global greenhouse gases. In contrast to traditional farming, Rosemont Horticultural uses 50% less water, 80% less fertilizer. We use no pesticides, no fossil fuels, and we have no food waste. And so not only are our farming methods better than the destructive methods used by traditional agriculture, they're better for our clients. Restaurants. Restaurants are experiencing unreliable access to affordable, high-quality, sustainable food due to seasonal changes. And they're receiving low-quality produce that's either already spoiled or has a short shelf life. Lettuce, for instance, in DC is shipped often from California or Arizona, and so the produce that they purchase, they have to throw portions of it away. And there's generally no year-round local fresh food options or farms. We provide chefs with affordable crops grown year-round with no environmental waste. And we're able to do that using our closed-loop vertical hydroponics system. But what does that mean? Rosemont is a vertical farm, meaning that we grow indoors using stacked layers. And this makes us not vulnerable to seasonal changes, and we're able to maximize our productivity per square foot. Rosemont is a hydroponics farm, meaning that instead of soil, we grow in a nutrient solution, which means our plants have consistent access to nutrients, water, and oxygen, allowing them to grow faster and healthier. And most unique of all about us is our closed-loop system. So unlike other vertical farms, Rosemont is able to introduce compost into its hydroponic system. So we plant our seedlings in pods, which we can directly input into the hydroponic system, whereas other hydroponic farms are wasting space and labor transplanting their seedlings from soil into other growing media before they introduce it into their hydroponic system. We cut out the middleman. Our seedlings and plants all the way through to the harvesting phase are in the same container. And then at the harvesting phase, we reuse those pods and compost them, further reducing our costs.
So what's the market opportunity for something like this? Well, we all eat food, and increasingly we're eating organic and local options. And the restaurants that we work with are recognizing this. They're seeing that people want this kind of high-quality food that we're able to grow. And so we're looking at independently owned restaurants that are kind of upscale. And we identified about 300,000 of those in the United States, 4,000 of those in the DMV alone. So we're in our proof of concept phase right now. And if we were to produce at full capacity for the rest of the year, that would be 800 pounds of produce, when restaurants are buying 20,000 pounds. So it's a big market. There's a lot of options for action. And there's competition because of this. But we think that we're doing a really good job of doing better than them. So the big player on the block right now is a farm called Arrow Farms. They're located in Newark, New Jersey. They just got $70 million in grants and investment money, which is really great for market validation of the industry as a whole. But that $70 million investment is comparable to them spending $7,000 per acre for outdoor farmland that's only valued at around $3,000 per acre. So they're overpaying. Farmed Here used to be the world's largest vertical farm, and they recently shut down. Same reason as Arrow Farms, that we expect them to face challenges. They're overpaying. They're spending time, energy, resources on developing software and engineering systems, whereas we already know what we have and we already know that it works. Closer to our scale is actually a participant in last year's competition, which is Homegrown Farms. they still made the same mistake, even though they're at the smaller scale. They spent $70,000 on a shipping container farm. At the same time that they're paying more at the outset, their operating costs, and this is true of many hydroponic farms, are a lot higher. And this is because of the closed loop issues that Devin mentioned. So their per plant cost for their hydroponic medium is higher than ours. And at the end of the day, where we have an opportunity to recycle and reduce costs, they're just generating waste for a landfill. So we're really differentiating ourselves from these farms. We estimate that our initial CapEx for building a vertical farm is less than half of our competitors. We also know that our operating costs are lower and that we have a truly closed-loop system design. We doubled down on producing food efficiently and producing it cheaply and then selling it. And at the end of the day, we have the right partnerships, technology, and experience to really make it work. But what does all this talk look like? Well, like any good startup, we started in a garage. And we took 130 square feet of that and built it into a fully functioning farm. So we went from that process, took us about 2 months. And in that 2 months, we were completely sold out. In other words, without doing any marketing or anything like that whatsoever, customers approached us and wanted to buy more than we could even produce. So that means right now we're in a production pause, and we're using that pause to kind of re-engineer, rebuild a little bit, and we're expecting to triple our production. And this is just for the proof of concept. Also during that time, we've had interest from 5 different potential customers, distributors, restaurant groups, and also from the World Bank, who approached us and wanted to talk about the applications of doing something like this for refugee camps. So what are our next steps? Right now we're very tiny and we're at a hyper-local level, but we want to take that and we want to grow and we want to expand. And our expansion is only limited by the square foot of our facilities. So we're going to go from a local to a regional and then to generating global impact. And here's a more specific timeline of what that looks like. And what I want you guys to focus on is the bottom row, years 2, 4, and 6. Because these are the years where we plan to make our facility build-outs. The first stage of that is a 2,000 square foot facility, which is going to allow us to sell to between 40 and 50 restaurants. Right now, we're only selling to 2. The next stage of that is a 5,000 square foot facility, which represents in restaurants about 150 potential customers. And I draw your attention to this because this is a point in time where we're going to have to switch from selling to restaurants to working with distributors. And so our financials, which you'll see in 1 second, are going to reflect this. We're going to have, be able to sell for a lower amount, but we're going to have lower costs at the same time because we have fewer clients. So here are some of those key financials. And because we have this proof of concept model, we're really confident in the numbers here. We know what our costs per unit are. We know what we're able to sell for. We know how much rent is, how much utilities are. We know how much time it takes to do the planting and the seeding. And so because of this, we're very confident, especially in our gross margins and the trajectory of the growth there. We've had solid conversations with our suppliers, with our partners, who have been able to accurately describe to us the kind of discounts we can get when we start buying in bulk. And to make it even a little more granular, we wanted to break down our actual cost per unit for you as well. So for a pound of produce, it costs us about $3.25. And this is everything that's taken into account with that. We're able to sell that, depending on the type of plant it is, for about $8 per pound. So I want to leave the financial section with these 2 reminders. One, our capital expenditures to do this are less than half of other vertical farms, while at the same time, our margins are more than double that of conventional farms, and that's when we expand. Conventional farms are sitting about 25% for their gross margins right now. So what do we need to do this? We're looking for $60,000, and that's going to cover the first build-out, the 2,000 square foot facility. And then it's going to allow us to install it, to construct it, as well as to give us some operating runway to get started generating sales. And quite frankly, we believe we have a really strong team to make this possible. We both have really good backgrounds that are a great fit for here. I've been working with vertical farming and in the vertical farming industry for 4 years. I've worked at other vertical farms. I've done consulting, and I've ran a website that's all about vertical farming for, again, 4 years. And importantly, I have restaurant connections and experience. So I know how to talk to chefs, which more importantly means I know how to sell to chefs. And then Devin brings a lot to the table as well.
I'm currently pursuing a law degree at GW Law, which has come in handy for purchasing contracts. I'm also ready to leverage my experience and my background with my master's in nutrition education, as well as my experience teaching in the DMV area and my past 5 years of employment with the World Bank to expand Rosemont during its franchise phase. In summary, we have half the cost per square foot of other vertical farms. We are truly sustainable. We have a proven concept and demonstrated market demand. And we have the know-how and partnerships necessary to take this idea into the future. Thank you, and we'll take your questions.
So, I get a lot of the case that you make in what is becoming a pretty competitive space, because people are doing this in different ways, is around that you're half the cost as other vertical farms. So I have a few questions there. One, what's defensible in what makes you half the cost of other vertical farms?
I'll let Evan do that while I pass out some plants.
Yeah, so for example, most hydroponic and vertical farms use a substrate called rock wool. And what rock wool is basically insulation. It's stone that's been superheated, thrown in a giant heater/cotton candy machine. It gets spun around, and it makes these little square cubes that you can stick a plant in. Those cost twice as much as what we're using. We're using basically a wood fiber pot. And so not only does that pot cost less on the per plant scale, but we can also throw it in the compost and then get soil, which also cuts out our medium costs at the end of the day as well. Another thing that really drives our costs down, I mentioned the shipping container model. There's a lot of shipping container farms right now, and they go for about $70,000. We built our whole farm, and it's probably about half the production of one of those shipping container models for $1,400, and then $7,000 to outfit it with the hydroponics equipment. So we're way cheaper than what they're doing, and the reason that is because we're not trying to be like a cool vertical farming company. We're trying to say, what do we need to grow food really efficiently and really quickly, and that's.
But so what I didn't hear in that was anything that's defensible. Like, what's to stop any of these other players from doing just that?
Sure. So one, I don't think a lot of them have the know-how, and what I mean by that is they're looking at vertical farming from either a business perspective or from a technology perspective. So the big players right now are focused on developing software. They don't really understand the sustainability elements, the handyman elements, and the plant elements. So the way that they could get into that, of course, is hiring people. But if we're the first actor, we're going to already carve out that spot of the demand.
It's really first market, kind of getting to the right players quickest.
Right. It's a race.
So while there's a race, sorry.
That's okay.
While there's a race, so looking at the arrow marks, and sounds like there's a couple of inputs here. One is expensive real estate was a cost, was an input that led to some of the demise of these companies, because just the arbitrage of the real estate was a negative proposition for them. But is there a correlation to the vicinity of where you're building these vertical farms and the establishments where they were forced to be in like a tier 1 market?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. Do you want me to take it? Okay, so right now we're located less than a 10-minute bike ride from all of our restaurant customers. But that's, of course, a proof of concept. So when we're talking about scale, what we're talking about is locating either on very inexpensive land, and the way we get to that is with co-location opportunities, which is some discussions that we've been having, but also by locating ourselves near distributors. And so instead of this kind of cliche about urban food production and being in the middle of a city, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense if you're in the middle of a city, but the restaurants in the city you're servicing are here, 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 and you have to send trucks to your distributor over here before those trucks go back to those restaurants. So we're talking about locating near distributors. We do have one that we've briefly spoken with in Frederick to do just that, and that's actually on land that we already have access to, so there wouldn't be any rent costs there.
Got it. I have a quick follow-up question. Did you have a question? I know you had raised
No,
your
go
hand.
ahead. Good. It's okay.
So the first to market seems to be a race. I think that's what you had mentioned. What's the kind of typical deal structure between a fulfillment partner and like a restaurant group? Is that an exclusive annual contract? Is that switching costs seem to be pretty low depending on economics for restaurants. So if this is simply you're trying to cheat time, get there first, the hydroponics doesn't seem to have a defensible patent, so to speak, versus the intellectual know-how. How do we create a moat, right, around what you guys are doing? And is that through contracts with partners, et cetera?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'll let Devin answer the contract situation, but just with this introduction that our contract structure is different than what that currently is. So
Maybe I can ask it another way. the other incumbents, Aero Farms, etc.,
Yes.
when they're working with a restaurant group, is that on a long-term contract, right? Or is it on a short-term contract to be the supplier and partner of choice? If that is, like, if it is a race of time and you want to get there before kind of these other companies get to understanding the economic value of the hydroponic model, then is that what you guys are going to go pursue? How do you maintain first mover advantage is kind of the net question.
I see, yes, just guaranteeing through the contract that they will be buying from us solely for a certain period of time.
But and restaurants won't do that.
Restaurants will do that. All our restaurants are doing that
Or
right now.
they're doing contracts with you?
Yes.
Yeah, and right now they're super short term because we're still in our proof of concept
Yeah,
phase.
okay.
But
That's
But through
interesting.
discussions, like,
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, I'm in the food business as well, and so it's really surprising to me that you can get contracts, and also sometimes like the chefs, aren't necessarily the purchasers. It could just be like some
Yes.
random guy in the kitchen, and so there's kind of that piece, and then I do get the kind of race to the finish, and like how do you control intellectual property as it relates to growing techniques and food? It's like, if you can crack that nut, like, go GW Law School. And so, there's that piece. And, I do really think it's smart to align with a distributor, because if your main expertise is in differentiating yourself because of your growth technique, you might need to be focused as you scale on making sure there's quality control, because the labor of having to hire a whole bunch of people to make sure these things are growing properly and this and that to free you up to do sales is going to be, so one, I would either suggest like getting a salesperson and focusing in on those restaurants, or two, I don't see why it has to be one or the other, and I don't see why working with a distributor would need to be kind of a year down the line. Like, I would definitely advise you to kind of go with a really good one, and of course for you that's going to mean your profit margin is going to be a lot lower, and so it's also something that you need to be able to take into consideration. But I'm sure you guys probably know that.
yes, and we are working with 2 distributors already right now, but you're right.
But the World Bank thing, that's very interesting.
Yes.
So speaking just to the geography aspect of this, what area of the U.S. has the greatest need for this?
Not specifically areas, more of I would say lower income areas, or areas where agriculture has kind of failed.
yeah, and so the thinking behind that is that, and I kind of want to address Anastasia's point as well about, and your point as well, Ryan, about the defensibility of this. And I'll get back to what you had in mind as well. So most traditional farms are also not patentable or defensible. And the reason that they don't necessarily have to be is because, again, there's such a high demand for food. So while that could help us down the line, is not a necessary thing for right now. And so then, to Devin's point of low income areas, it comes back to this as well. We can put these farms in low income areas and get people jobs, get people training, because it is, and as you're in the restaurant industry, this is a premium product. But the people that are growing it, we can give them a livelihood. Two, we can lower our operational expenses by doing that.
I think the key is also like finding those quality people.
Yeah. And we're really happy about our flexible design, or I would call it a modular design, because we can move to do that.
So, 2 quick questions. One, what are you growing now?
Right now we're growing what is requested of us, which is lettuce and basil.
And 2, marijuana.
Yeah, so we've thought about that, and we have experience in that. It's not legal where our farms are right now, and that's essentially where we stopped it at. You can do it in DC, but you have to go through a very long and expensive licensing process, and also it's taken up already. We wouldn't be able to get them at this point unless legislation changes.
But it's on the roadmap.
Yes. Yeah.
Can I ask one last question too? Because like you're growing basil, like I'd love to buy some of that up for my lemon basil gelato in a second. But what is your price point? Because my other thought is some of this stuff could go towards manufacturers that could use it in bulk. But if the labor intensity factor and the quality factor is like super high, like you might be able to get into the fine dining restaurant, but it might kind of prevent you from kind of accessing those larger accounts.
So we talked about that, and I don't think that we see our costs.
Time's up.
Okay.
All right. Anyway, we should talk.
Yeah.